We're joined now via Skype by the DUP's Jim Wells and in studio here in Dublin by Sinn Féin's Matt Carthy. Jim, if I can start with you, was Arlene Foster really moved out of her position as leader of the DUP because she'd abstained on a vote on gay conversion therapy and the banning of it, rather than voting in favour of its retention?
No, that was just the straw that broke the camel's back, as it were. There had been a whole series of issues between Arlene and the backbenchers, and this culminated in what happened last week. But what happened last week in itself would not have led to what happened today. There had been many, many other issues which have been building up for well over a year.
And what are the most important of those issues? Is it in relation to the protocol and the border down the Irish Sea?
The protocol was a major issue. There's huge concern amongst the unionists about it. The effective border down the Irish Sea is an anathema to unionists. And at one stage, Arlene actually said there were benefits in the protocol. Nobody in the unionist community sees any remote idea of there being benefits in the protocol. And there had been a breakdown in the normal day-to-day relationships between Arlene and the backbenchers. She was not good at building up friendships within the party.
But even if she's gone now, do you really think a replacement is going to be in a position to actually change international law, persuade Boris Johnson to give up on a protocol that he freely entered into?
Well, there's huge problems ahead when the protocol unwinds. The derogation on medicines ends on the 1st of October, and there could be chaos because 98% of our medicines come from the rest of the United Kingdom. There's cracks are beginning to appear. And part of Arlene's problem was we said we're going to withdraw from the cross-border bodies as a protest against the protocol. And then we went back in last week. And we said we went to the meeting, but we didn't engage fully. Well, that's like Bill Clinton's famous phrase about taking drugs. It was beginning to unravel the mixed messages. We needed a coherent anti-protocol message. And I'm afraid at times Arlene wasn't able to portray that.
OK, Matt Carthy, does that strike you so that we're now going to have a DUP taking a much harder line in relation to the protocol and that we're going to have much more difficulty in relation to this border down the Irish Sea?
Well, I'm sure many of your viewers will be wondering what a more right-wing DUP could possibly look like. On a personal level, obviously, I wish Arlene Foster well. Politics is a tough game, and she's had a tough 24 hours. In respect of the DUP, yes, there's a huge contingent of the DUP that will be resistant to any type of progressive change. You heard Jim talking about the gay conversion vote as a factor. The very fact that it was even a consideration in relation to a leader of a party on the island of Ireland is concerning, I have to say. And there will be some, and probably a majority of the DUP, who will try and resist every facet of progressive change, whether that's in relation to the Irish language, whether it's in relation to LGBT rights, whether it's in relation to women's rights, whether it's in relation to the Brexit protocol.
Yeah, but ultimately, Ian Paisley, Peter Robinson were able to work with Sinn Féin. Would you anticipate that whoever comes in as leader of the DUP will end up working with you?
Yes, because it's the only way in which a political party in the North can have any influence is through the power-sharing arrangements. So in order for Sinn Féin to try and influence the type of positive changes that we want to see happening across society, we have to work with the DUP alongside all the other parties to the executive. The same is true for the DUP. So regardless of who emerges as the leader of the DUP, if they want to be able to assert political influence, then they're going to have to be part of the power-sharing institutions, and part of their work will be engaging in the cross-border bodies. Part of their works will be ensuring that anything that is agreed at a governmental level is agreed between the First and the Deputy First Minister's offices.
Jim, do you agree there with the assessment when offered by Matt that you'll just have to get on with it and work whoever the new leader is?
Well, it would help if Matt hadn't come out with scandalous comments about a terrorist at the weekend, which makes it very difficult for unionists to work with his party. And until he stops eulogising about terrorism and trying to say that these are great volunteers fighting for Ireland, the better. We will have to continue in the mandatory coalition and work with all parties. And I am confident that whoever takes over the leadership will continue to do that, but will stand up to Sinn Féin and also will do everything within their power to disrupt the protocol, which is toxic. the constitutional status of Northern Ireland.
Matt,
And
I'm going to
we
have
as
to
a
ask.
party-
Sorry, Jim, I'm going to have to ask Matt to respond to that in relation to your attendance at a ceremony over the weekend honouring an IRA murderer from the past, Seamus McElwain. Do you regret that now? Because the offence that caused, not just to many unionists, but also to many constitutional Republicans.
No, I don't regret it at all. I have to say, Matt, Seamus McElwain was from County Monaghan. He was a young man. He was 26. He was engaged in a conflict that we're all very thankful is behind us. And we're going to have different interpretations of history.
But are you legitimising his actions? Because he was properly convicted of a number of murders. He was suspected of others. Arlene Foster believed that he was responsible for shooting her own father.
Yeah, as I say, he was engaged in the conflict, and in that conflict, lots of people suffered, and I'm sorry about that. But Seamus McElwain's family also have suffered in the years since. Seamus himself was unlawfully killed. It's not me saying that; it's the inquest into his killing that determined that. Yes.
But isn't there a wider political problem, though, in that if you keep telling us that, look, Sinn Féin has moved on and not to be harking back to the past, you hark back to the past by celebrating somebody who many people would regard has been way beyond the pale in the way that he pursued his political ambitions.
And many people hold him in very high regard. People from his own community remember Seamus McElwain as an ordinary country lad that in other circumstances would never have engaged in conflict of any kind. But he was involved in a conflict, and we have different interpretations and we have different readings of it. The most important aspect of it is that the conflict is over. And that's the job of the institutions, and that's the purpose of power sharing. It's so that people with different views in relation to the conflict, different views of history, different aspirations in terms of the future, work together for the common good in the here and now. And that's what I'm not going to challenge and expect Jim Wells to change his political views in order to enter power sharing.
Okay.
But I am going to insist that there is agreement before political decisions are made.
Jim, do you expect the DUP to change significantly under a new leader? Do you expect it to take a harder line on certain positions?
I'd certainly hope so, particularly on Brexit issues. I'm confident of the identity of who will take over, and I'm certain that he will indeed do everything within his power to break the protocol.
Sorry, who do you expect to take over, Jim?
Well, I think everyone is suggesting that Edwin Poots is going to take over. That's the suggestion. He would have my support, he'd have my entire support, but of course I can't speak for others. Though Arlene has said that she's not going to resign. It's going to be a two-stage resignation, which won't actually take effect until the end of June. So there's an opportunity for other candidates to emerge. But as things stand at the moment, there's no doubt that Edwin Poots has the largest degree of support amongst the party. No question about it.
Is there a danger, though, for you, Jim, that the DUP, in following this course, could lose support in the north, that you could lose support particularly to people who want a more moderate approach in the way that Alliance has been gaining, and that will mean that the next time there's Assembly elections, that Sinn Féin could end up as the biggest party in the north instead of the DUP?
Well, sadly, the party was drifting, and had we retained the present leadership, I think undoubtedly that would have happened. So we need someone who can unite the party around its core values, particularly on Brexit, the Irish language, and indeed the moral issues which many of us in Northern Ireland care a lot about, the protection of the unborn child, the sanctity of marriage, issues like that which are important to many tens of thousands of people in Northern Ireland. And therefore, I believe that a candidate can unite the party around those core values. And can I say to Matt Carthy, could I say just how difficult it is for us to sell the idea of sitting in government with Sinn Féin is every time he comes out with the ridiculous comments he made last weekend.
What about Edwin Poots as leader? Given your experiences of him to date, how well do you think would Sinn Féin be able to work with him if he becomes the DUP boss?
Well, the nature of power sharing is that we don't have any say over who the DUP appoint.
No, but what I'm asking you is, given what you know of him as a person, how do you think you deal with him?
And I think the experience of power sharing is that if the political will is there on the part of the five parties of the executive, then progress can be made. So Edmund Poots has done and taken what I would consider to be very regressive positions on key issues. But Edmund Poots isn't going to change the protocol. Edmund Poots isn't going to be able to stop the tide for change. If the DUP expect that that's going to happen, well, then they're on the road to nowhere.
Jim Wells the last word on that. Is this perhaps that you're tilting at windmills here a bit?
No, because when we have been coherent and strong, we've actually polled exceptionally well. So therefore, we need to go back to the time when the DUP was clearly the largest party by a considerable measure. And that was not going to happen under Arlene. There had to be change. And I'm confident there's a bright future for the party, as long as people like Mr. Carthy don't make life difficult for us.
And is there no room for liberal or progressive people in the DUP who want things like greater equality?
We're not opposed to equality. We've never said we were, but we are traditional
marriage and things. Okay, sorry, we're out of time. Our thanks to Jim Wells and Matt Carthy for joining us on the programme.